All right. Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Kabbalah Explained Simply. Great to be here. My name is Asaf, and I'm broadcasting to you live from Israel. Um, as you're entering the broadcast and entering the chat, I'd love to know where you're connecting from. So please let us know where you're from. Write it in the chat. I already see Carl from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Joanna from LA, and Sylvie from the Netherlands, and Suzanne from Montana, and Riza from Germany. All right, yeah, so let us know where you're watching from. The title for today broadcast, as you've seen, is How You and a Few Others Like You Can Unlock the Key to Universal Connection. And of course, this is a Kabbalah Explained Simply session. So we're talking about the method of Kabbalah, the wisdom of Kabbalah, and how this authentic wisdom shows us that key that we have within us. That essentially what this wisdom does. We'll start in just a few seconds. I want to say that if you have any questions as we're going, do send them in the chat, even if I don't answer them right away. I'll wait for a moment where it makes sense, and then I'll take a look and see your questions. There are also some great friends of mine helping me behind the scenes collect your questions so I can, make sure that I can answer as many as possible. And yeah, I think we're ready to go. So, quick intro, and we're starting. All right, so we want to know how to unlock the key to universal connection. What is that key? What is universal connection? Right? What does that even mean? And to get into that discussion, we'll start with the definition of the Creator according to Kabbalah. This is a very important thing to understand when you approach the wisdom of Kabbalah and start studying it. You understand that the definitions are probably not the same as what you thought of, what you were used to, all kinds of preconceived notions. Um, and it's very much so with this very important definition of the Creator. So let's start with what it isn't. When we talk about the Creator in Kabbalah, we're not talking about some sort of clearly a white bearded old person sitting on the clouds, handing out gifts or punishments according to whims, right? That's not what we're talking about. But we're also not talking about some sort of deity or some sort of a being that is disconnected from this entire universe and somehow rules the universe based on some sort of a calculation that we don't understand. This is not the right depiction of the concept, the Creator, from a Kabbalistic perspective. And to help us understand how Kabbalists relate to this term, the Creator, how they perceive this concept of the Creator, let's read a quick quote from my teacher, Kabbalist Dr. Michael Leitman. And he said, actually, just a few days ago in a short conversation with students, he said the following: the Creator encompasses all of creation. That is why he is greater than everything, enveloping everyone, holding everyone. It's a reality that includes all of us in it. So, when we talk about the Creator from a Kabbalistic perspective, we are talking about a force, a governing force that binds all elements of reality as one. It is the invisible connecting thread or glue that binds together all elements of creation, all elements of nature, and actually not just those that are visible to us, but also those that are invisible to us. In other words, um, in another famous article from Kabbalist Yehuda Ashlag, also known as Baal Sulam, the greatest Kabbalist of the previous century, he writes very clearly that from a Kabbalistic perspective, the word God and the word nature are actually synonymous. Why? Because if you think of the totality of nature, everything that nature is, then you're actually talking about God or the Creator. In other words, when we think of the system of nature, we're not just talking about plants, animals, trees, planets, human beings, particles, biology, astronomy, chemistry, everything that we find there. This is not all that is included in this word nature. If we are talking about nature, then we're talking about the program that is embedded into everything that exists in nature, connecting all the elements of reality, all the elements of nature, driving them, sustaining them, developing them to grow. There's a deep program that binds together everything that we witness in reality and that which we don't witness. And that program, if you will, is, or that thought, if you want to call it that way, that is already what we can relate to as belonging to that concept of creator or that concept of God. Because how we perceive nature is through our limited perception. We perceive our life in nature as little pieces in a gigantic thing in a vast universe, right? We experience reality through this axis of time, past, present, and future. But even when we investigate nature from a scientific perspective, through the ordinary material sciences that we're used to, biology, physics, astronomy, zoology, and so forth, we still see, even through that limited way of research, we still identify that everything is connected to everything, right? The biology of our life, for example, is connected to our psychology. It's connected to our climate, even. It's connected to the ecosystem that we're in. That's connected also to how we influence the ecosystem that we're in. Meaning, if you take any item in nature, any item in reality, not just the human being, you see that it's interconnected with its environment. And if you zoom out more, you see that that environment, that ecosystem, let's say, is connected to a larger system and ultimately maybe to the biosphere. And the biosphere of Earth is also connected to what's happening in outer space, the sun, the moon, other planets and constellations. And you end up with a very almost trivial understanding that all of the universe is a single system. And that single system, if everything is connected, that means everything is governed by a single program. We, however, don't identify that it's a single program. We can just derive some ideas about all kinds of connections. When we investigate nature, we see all kinds of connections in it. And then we can say, okay, oh, that's an ecosystem. What this animal is doing has to do with the climate in that season and has to do with migration of other animals and so on and so forth, and the growth of the plants and the growth of the trees and the energy from the sun. We can somehow see the connections. But that's just what we see, what we can document, what we can notice and perceive. We live in a program that connects everything way beyond our experience of it. That means that even what we think of as completely detached from nature, our thoughts, our desires, our intentions, our ideas about life, about good and bad, right or wrong, pleasure or pain, all of those are not detached from the system of nature. We just don't tend to relate to them as part of the same system of nature. We tend to relate to them as our own. This is human. What we do with the planet, for instance, we think about it as detached from the program of nature. There's nature and it works in some sort of a balanced, homeostatic kind of a dynamic. And then we humans come and pollute it or, destabilize it. But even our actions, which we think of as economic or political or military, they too, if you zoom out, you see clearly they too are part of nature. Everything that we do, think, and feel as individuals and as a collective society, that too is included in the definition of what is nature. And everything there in our human life, individually and collectively, is also governed by the same overarching global program, universal program that governs all of life. So that means that from a Kabbalistic perspective, our thoughts, our desires, our ideas, our feelings, our inner world is interdependent and connected to the outer world. It's all a single reality, and we just don't perceive the connection. And so, if we go back to this quote from my teacher, Kabbalist Dr. Michael Leitman, uh, the Creator encompasses all of creation. That's why He's greater than everything, enveloping everyone, holding everyone. It's a reality that includes all of us in it. So when we think of this concept of the Creator, or sometimes we refer to it as the thought of creation, the thought behind creation, the thought that governs creation. Kabbalists use the term the thought of creation many times when they want to discuss the program by which this creator governs life, governs reality, governs all of development. This means there's a single thought that includes within it everything that exists. Now, on a superficial level, this is easy to understand. You think about like everything that can ever exist in the world, and you just draw like some sort of a border around it, and you call that the thought of creation, the creator. And that now brings us closer already in a simplistic way to this definition that the Kabbalists are talking about. When they refer to the creator, they were referring to this governing program. So this is closer. But if we think about what that means, that takes us deeper. This means that everything that exists in reality, what we perceive and don't perceive, what's visible and invisible to us, as well as everything that feels, not just appears, but feels on our flesh, let's say, in our hearts, everything that feels opposite and contradictory, when we see bad things in our life, in the world, in reality, when we see good things, when we think of bad people and good people, when we think of truth and false, right and wrong, good and bad, when we think of all of those opposites and contradictions that we perceive in our reality, we need to conclude, if we understand correctly the definition of the creator Kabbalistically, then we need to conclude that from the perspective of the thought of creation, there are no opposites and contradictions, meaning that thought is somehow holding all that exists, including all of the most extreme opposites you can think of, in a single unity. There is an underlying oneness that holds everything that seems to be opposite in creation and everything in between. It's like if you think of just black and white and all of the infinite spectrum of colors in between. When we are talking about the thought of creation, we're talking about a thought that holds all of this spectrum as a single existence. So a unity of opposites is a very important quality that this concept, the creator, represents. And that's what makes the creator, from a Kabbalistic perspective, that's why we relate to this concept of God or the creator as higher, greater than us. It's not a religious kind of attitude to revere and respect that which is unknown to us. It's much more than that. It is the understanding that that our perception of the world is limited. Our existence is also very limited and fragmented, and there is a greater program that holds us inside of it. We, in a sense, exist inside the Creator. That is more of a Kabbalistic way of relating to this concept of the Creator. And so I'll remind again, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. I'll get to questions a little bit later on. I also want to mention, before I move forward, that very soon we have a special event we call the KabU Retreat. KabU is our education center for the authentic wisdom of Kabbalah in the English language. And once in a while, once a year typically, we have a special kind of gathering that happens both physically and virtually. I'll talk about it more later on, maybe, and probably. And I just want to mention that there's a special discount for those who want to participate in that retreat, in that event. You'll find it somewhere in the chat. I'm sure my friends will post it there. Also in the description under this video, you should find it there. So if you're interested, that's there. And I'll talk about it later on. So we talked about the concept of the Creator in the wisdom of Kabbalah. Now, from here, if we have some sort of a picture of what that means, then what is our role in this Creator, right? What is the true purpose of mankind? And so from the Kabbalistic writings, it says everywhere that the purpose of the human is far beyond what we can perceive through our physical level of existence, through this bodily kind of experience of the five senses, where we need to just, eat and have shelter over our head and have sex, and we have desires for money and honor and power. All of that existence is considered a physical existence. Humanity's true purpose goes beyond just mere survival and an attainment of material pleasures. That is just a temporary existence where we feel like we exist in physical bodies for a certain limited amount of time. And when that ends, then everything else about us ends. That's what we believe. That's what we experience. That's what we seem to know from our existence. But Kabbalists teach us that the purpose of the human is to rise above this level of just mere physical existence and discover and connect with what we just defined as the Creator, or the thought of creation, the program that governs the whole of existence. How is that even possible, right? But this happens actually when we become similar in our intention, in our quality, in the motivation that drives our existence. When we are able to calibrate this inner motivation to life, let's call it intention, because that's a more accurate term kabbalistically. When we are able to change and correct the direction, let's say, calibrate our intention to a certain direction, to a certain frequency, if you will, we can begin to experience this governing program that binds us with all of creation. And so, connection to the Creator is the hidden purpose of of the human. And it's a very interesting thing. It's a peculiar thing if you think about it, that if you ask any human in the world, what are you here for? Not just what are you doing in life to provide for yourself? What is your career? What is this life about? If that's the question you put in front of a human being today in 2025, let's say, right? Who knows the answer? Some people have all kinds of beliefs about what that answer is. There's all kinds of belief systems and religions and so forth that teach you a certain story, a certain narrative, and typically, if it's a belief system, then it's about believing in it and just believing that this is so. But does anyone actually know what is their purpose in this life and is working in a systematic way, practically, to gradually get to that purpose? That's the kind of attitude that Kabbalists have towards reality. That desire to know the purpose of life exists in every human being. But in most people, it's just dormant. It's something they think about once in a while. Maybe when there's a hardship in life, a crisis, a life-changing event, or just when they're very bored and maybe a depression, some sort of a sadness kicks in. It could be in many different ways. A lot of people do feel at times that question, what's it all for? What's the purpose? But most people don't live with that question regularly, and certainly don't dedicate some of their life, their time, their efforts, their focus to answering that question, because we don't believe that there is an answer. But Kabbalists say no, this desire that every human being has, which animals don't have, it's very unique to humans, this desire to know, what am I living for? And if we just focused on it, and instead of pushing it aside, pushing it away, or repressing it, or trying to fill ourselves with some other things just to distract ourselves from that question, if we really open our hearts to that question and tell ourselves, okay, I need to figure out what's going on here. I need to understand, why am I alive? What's the purpose of human existence? Why am I here? What's my goal here? If that becomes important to you, then Kabbalists say you can begin to develop that unique desire. They call it the point in your heart, the point in the heart, this point that while everything else in your heart, all your other desires, that is, they're pretty clear. You want sex, you want food, you want money, you want control, you want a career, you want all kinds of things that are understood to you through your five senses and your physical experience. This desire is a point. It's tiny, and the fulfillment that it craves is unclear. It's a question mark within the human heart. And that question mark seeks the purpose of our life. And if we pay attention to it and begin to develop it, we can begin to be in tune with the force that created us, with the force that governs our existence, because it put that desire in us to begin with. And it's actually something that becomes, this desire becomes our line of communication, our dialogue. The development of this desire becomes our dialogue with the force that governs our life. Because we're asking, where is our life coming from? And by that, we're beginning to make contact with the source of life itself. Now, how do we actually come to discover and connect with this thought of creation that governs our life, this or what we call the creator? How does that happen? And the answer, Kabbalistically, is equivalence of form. So if you think about what's equivalence of form, in a few words, if you think about how things get closer in our world, you think about taking some things, maybe this cup, for example, and this remote for the air conditioner, two things I have at hand, happen to have at hand. And if I put them together in this world, in time and space, they are close, and I call them close, even though these are completely two different things. From a physical perspective, they're close. If we want to get close to the Creator, physicality is irrelevant here. Getting closer in spirituality means becoming similar in our quality. More specifically, becoming similar in our aim, in our intention. And so the quality of our intention will determine our distance from this program that governs reality called the Creator. Now, that's a very interesting thing. I don't know how deep we should get into now, because I also want to get to your questions. Maybe I'll take a look at some questions, and let's see if we can move forward this way. All right. So I see one from Dr. Kananga asking, I'd like to ask, why was it that the prophets and other mystics did it on their own without a group? And what does one do if he or she cannot find a group? Oh, that's a perfect question that I was planning on getting to that later, but I'll get to it now. First of all, if you look at what happened in the past, you're talking about ancient, I don't know about all kinds of mystics, but if we're talking about ancient Kabbalists, then first of all, this issue of studying together in a group and so forth, in a group settings, doesn't come from recent times. It comes at least almost 4,000 years ago, Kabbalistically. But even before that, and even between now and 4,000 years ago, there were situations where we learn about Kabbalists who existed in mostly on their own. So were they not connecting with others? In those cases, there might have been special, unique individuals who had achieved connection with others internally. And so that is another possibility. But before I go, so that's just to give you a quick answer. But I'll get to this. I'll go deeper into our topic, and then you'll get a deeper answer as well. So, what does it mean to become like the Creator? That'll help us understand how the issue of connection with others fits in here. To become closer to the Creator, to begin to discover the Creator, to connect with the Creator, means to become like the Creator. How can we become like the Creator? This happens through equivalence of form, meaning we need to equalize what we want in life, let's say, so that it's similar to what this force that governs reality wants or is. And as we've learned, this force called the Creator, or the thought of creation, if you want to look at it that way. It um, it includes all of reality in it. And so when we think of a person becoming like the Creator, that means that we have to embrace all of creation, all of humanity, all of nature, everything that exists into our heart. That would be the complete equivalence of form with the Creator. Just like He, let's say, the Creator holds all of creation in it, embraces all of creation. If we can become similar to that in our intention, we can begin to, as if broadcast on the same frequency as the Creator. We can begin to perceive this program that binds all of reality if we become somewhat like it. This is the true meaning of what the ancient Kabbalists wrote in this formula called "Love thy neighbor as thyself." It isn't some ethics, or it's not about morality. This is what we think thousands of years later, and we think about it as some beautiful thing to tell our children, and hopefully they'll behave like nicely to others, and others will behave nicely to them. That is a completely reduced and shallow, transient, limited understanding of what's really encoded in this like formula. As I said, love thy neighbor as thyself means if I can relate to everything outside of me, everything that is other than me, if I can relate to all of reality outside of me as my own, as myself, when I achieve equivalence between how I relate to what I think of as myself, my own, my me, and what I think of as other, as outside of me, right? If I can do that, equalize these intentions, then I would become like the Creator. Then this formula, love thy friend as thyself, describes a complete and total transformation of the human heart, a total expansion of human perception. That's what was encoded into this simple maxim. It is the way to discover the universal connection that binds together all of reality. And it's an interesting thing that when we look at what scientists today are gradually finding more and more, it's interesting to see that they're coming to, some scientists in different realms are coming to all kinds of findings that they can't explain from a classic physical perspective. Like the issue, for instance, of quantum entanglement is very peculiar, very very weird, very strange. In 2022, just a couple years ago, 3 physicists received the Nobel Prize in Physics for experimentally proving that quantum entanglement is real. And quantum entanglement, without getting too sciencey here, just a simple oversimplified description, it means that if there's a particle that is entangled with another particle, they can instantly affect each other, even if one is here on Earth and the other one is, say, on the Andromeda galaxy. How is that possible? Within our understanding of time and space and the speed of light, that is just beyond our understanding. And while we can't understand what's behind it and exactly how it works, Einstein, thought about this. He theorized it, but he wasn't able to prove it back then. He was actually thinking that it can't be. He called it spooky action at a distance, meaning we don't know how to explain this. Today we can prove that it's actually happening. We still don't know why and how. And so there is a connection at the bottom of reality, if you will, between all that exists. And in our experience, in our perception, we see separate things. We see time and space. We live through this prism of past, present, and future, even though this distinction could completely be our own making. And so we perceive and experience a reality that we think is what's outside of us, but that's just our own perception. And from a Kabbalistic perspective, we have no idea where we are. The Kabbalists say, listen, it's life is not what we think. We don't really know what we are, who we are, and what we're really doing here. And the fact is that if you ask a human being, what's the purpose of human life? We don't know. But we can discover it. And that's the big thing that Kabbalists add to our life. And here's the main thing that Kabbalists found. They found that if we can find this connection, even in just a group of people, because of the fractal structure of reality, which I'll explain in a second, we can find that universal connection that exists throughout all of creation, even if we just do it in a small group of people. This is the big news from Kabbalists to the world, starting from, well, ultimately about 6,000 years ago, but this method of doing it through a group began about 3,800 years ago with Abraham, and since then and so forth. Won't go into the history of Kabbalah right now, but this is the big message. This is the big news. This is the big delivery of upper knowledge that Kabbalists want to communicate to us, that groups of people, if they work to find that connection between them, we still need to understand what that is. It's not just being nice to each other. It's not at all that. That could be a side effect, a nice, welcome side effect from that, but that's not what it takes. But if we can find this deeper connection, even in just a group of people, it's the same connection that exists throughout reality. Why? Because reality, even though we think about it as time and space and past, present, future, and everything is made of particles, all of that is just wrong. That's not the true structure of reality. The true structure of reality is a kind of a holistic, complete, and perfect structure that can be detailed more and more and more, but it's always the same structure, much like a fractal. Take a look at this quote from the great Kabbalist of the previous century, Baal Sulam. He writes this: "There is indeed only one soul in the world. That same soul is complete in each and every one, as in Adam HaRishon." Adam HaRishon is a Kabbalistic term that describes the initial created being, the initial state of the soul that was created. Let's continue to the rest of the quote and I'll explain a bit more. "Since the spiritual is indivisible and cannot be cut, which is rather a trait of corporeal things." So this is very, very important to understand. In our world, we can cut things up and divide things. And we therefore think that not everything is connected to everything. We see that one thing can happen in one place and another thing happens in another place. Seemingly, they're disconnected. We can see that if we take a structure, a physical structure, we can break it apart to pieces. So we think that the way we perceive and the way we experience reality is how reality is built. But the spiritual nature of reality, which is deeper than this material experience that we're having, that reality, that structure is complete. It's whole. And what Kabbalists find is a structure that repeats itself in in infinite resolutions, if you will, at infinite scales, but it's the same structure. They call that structure, by the way, the 10 sfirot. And essentially, that structure represents the unit of spiritual life. If you will, just for the sake of example, you can think about it like a cell in the human body, let's say. So, what's an organ? It's a group of cells, right? What's a human body? It's many groups of different cells organized in tissues and so on, but it's essentially the same structure, just at a different scale. We see the same phenomenon like in our anatomy. We see this in processes, in physiology. We see this in physics also, where there's a self-repeating pattern, or a self-similar pattern that repeats itself. And fractals are really a good example of that. For us, what matters is this. It means that the same kind of spiritual quality that we can attain in the correct connection between a group of people, it's the same glue, if you will, that binds all of creation. And that's the big news from Kabbalists, and that's what makes it relevant and pragmatic and possible, because otherwise, how would we become similar to the Creator? How would we embrace all of creation as an individual? That would just be impossible. Let me move on to some questions if we have them here. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left. We do have some, though. So I'll try to just pick a few questions maybe that can help us go deeper. Gina Fogel is asking, did the Creator intend to create humans in different colors? For example, black, white, oriental, etc. Good question, Gina. Where I would rephrase it, if you don't mind, to answer it as accurately as I can. Why do we see the variety that we see in the world? Forget a few skin colors. What about the millions of species that exist in nature? I can't remember the number, but there's just even just insects. There's many millions of species of just insects. If you look at particles, if you look at of course, humans as well, and not just their skin color, but all kinds of traits. You see a myriad of different traits and properties, and it just seems like infinite diversity. Where does that diversity come from? And that diversity ultimately comes from the infinite connection that exists between the quality of the created being and the quality of the Creator. In the spiritual reality, we call this the connection between the Malchut and the Keter, which is the two sfirot in the spiritual structure, between which all the other qualities exist. I don't want to make this too complicated. Let's just think about the Creator as the quality of complete, unconditional love, bestowal. We call it light or upper light in the wisdom of Kabbalah. And all this force wants is to give. It has no reference of self. It has no approach to itself. On the other end of reality, there's the created being. The created being is a receptacle. It's a vessel. It's designed to receive. It's the quality of reception. Between the quality of bestowal, the Creator, and the quality of reception, the created being, there are all of the possible combinations between them that, and all those myriad combinations on different scales and levels and percentages and qualities and what they come from a process called in Kabbalah the shattering, where in order for the quality of bestowal to connect with this quality of reception, they had to mingle with each other, let's say. I'm explaining this in a very simplistic way right now, but you can get the concept. And through this mingling, through this mixture between this complete two polar opposites of reality, from that comes all of the diversity that exists in our world. Specifically, there's much more detail. This is a big kind of general explanation. There's much more detail in the wisdom of Kabbalah that explains even why, like you asked, why people have certain skin colors. Ultimately, this comes from the structure of the vessel that was created. This is rooted in something called the four phases of direct light, which created the vessel of reception. I can't get into this now; it's too deep for this. But um, just to end this skin color issue, what matters for us is this. Bala Sulam writes beautifully in one of the most important articles about the spiritual work in a group of people. He writes that the purpose of creation is meant for everyone in the world, and he specifically writes whether black, white, yellow, or any other color. And of course, this is something that in our world can create, division and polarization and racism and so forth. But these are all outcomes that come from our egoistic perception of reality, our limited, narrow, egoistic sense of life, the world, our experience. Because of that, we fall into these divisions and racist ideas and so forth. But ultimately, all these colors of reality, not just skin colors, they are designed to create a harmony. Ultimately, you need all those differences because through those differences, you discover the unity of all opposites, which is the creator. So there's a godly harmony that in our world, in our egoistic experience, it is interpreted as differences that divide us. But from the creator's perspective, these are opposites designed to create a spiritual harmony. All right. I want to move forward. We don't have a lot of time. I'm sorry we couldn't get to a lot of questions, but I will mention that I am continuing. We have about 9 minutes for this session here on YouTube and social media. In 9 minutes, I'm going to be on Zoom with our students, the KabU students. If you're not a KabU student, you can still attend this Zoom session by quickly joining KabU. You can join for free, at least for a certain amount of time. There will be some details there are details in the description, and I hope our friends can post with regards specifically the access to the Zoom with regards to that. If they can post that in the chat too. So if you want to join this Q&A session that I'll have in just a few minutes about this, then you're welcome. You're more than welcome. Here on social media, I only have 8 minutes left, so I'll try our best. Maybe we can get to another question or two. Before that, however, I want to take it one step forward and discuss the power of Kabbalistic gatherings. Because look, if you understand, even just roughly, what Kabbalists define as the creator, this concept that includes everything in creation, this unity of opposites, that's number one. Number two, if you understand that the fractal structure of reality means that this thought of the creator, this thought of creation, this glue that binds together all opposites and everything that exists, it exists even in a small, between the atoms, between particles, between anything, there's that connection. And that connection is the creator. And that's why even in a small group of people, we can aim and calibrate our hearts to that connection. And so, what we do in Kabbalistic gatherings is exactly that. The power of Kabbalistic gatherings is that in an intimate settings, and typically, people who are serious about this, people who are getting into that, as I said, most of humanity, um, their desire for spirituality, their desire for the purpose of life, tends to be not that strong. There's other reasons for that, but the people who come to something like a Kabbalistic gatherings are typically people who they have a strong enough desire to bring them there, and so it's in intimate settings. It's not, like a massive thousands and thousands of people. We have an annual global event with a few thousand people as well. But this retreat, for instance, that we're going to have soon, in the first week of September, that one is an intimate event. And all you need is just this small group to begin to experience and find that deeper connection that exists universally. The Kabbalistic gathering is essentially just a meeting of people who are exploring this desire to discover the purpose of life in the best possible environment to do so. That is essentially what it is. We put ourselves in an environment typically secluded from distractions of the world, very much secluded from that. We surround ourselves with guidance from the sources of Kabbalah, these very special texts that discuss those deeper states of connection that we want to find between us. And we do all kinds of fun activities between us just to get us focused on that. And so what happens is, if we can come with the right kind of preparation, where everyone is only coming with that desire, what we call the point in the heart, that seeker point within us, the point that looks for the purpose of life. If we come with that desire, and the people around us are also coming with that desire, we begin to feel some resonance between these desires. We begin to feel some field, if you will. One of the impressions that we typically hear from new students who come to such a retreat is, I felt like I thought I came on my own, but I discovered I was actually brought here. It's a very unique kind of feeling that you feel like you are a part. You're governed in a force field. There's a force field of connection that brings you and other people, like-hearted people, people with the same kind of desire, bring you closer, and you begin to feel that magnetic force, let's say, between you. That's basically what we do in a Kabbalistic gathering. I want to read to you this quote I have here from my teacher. Let me just read it for you. The upper light requires a quorum. It requires a group of 10. There's a reason why 10, because 10, as I discussed before, is actually the basic structure of reality, 10 sfirot. But when we talk about the amount of people, it doesn't have to be exactly 10, because we're talking about spiritual qualities. So my teacher continues and says, the number doesn't matter, 2, 5, 10, even that is enough. But it requires a connection that is above the ego of the individual. We need to go beyond our inherent, instinctive, daily, mundane perception, where it's me and reality, me and my life, me and the rest of the world, me and nature, right? There's this division between me and everything else. In this spiritual effort that we're doing together with others in a Kabbalistic gathering, we're working to expand our perception. We're working to try to experience beyond and outside this limited egoistic view and experience of the world, to as if feel the space between us, if you want to put it that way. When there is a person who works above his ego to connect with someone else, already a spiritual system can be formed between them. So that's the big power of that. That's the amazing thing that can happen in a Kabbalistic gathering. As I said, I'll say a few more words about it. We have this retreat coming up. We call it the 3-day leap. It's a 3-day event. It's actually a hybrid event, so you could participate physically, which is absolutely more recommended. I can't say otherwise, because it's just more powerful this way. Because even though the inner work that we're doing, the spiritual development happens in the heart and the mind. That's where it happens. We don't need to do any special thing with our bodies. There are no special rituals or symbols, but there are exercises that help us calibrate our hearts. And when we do them in a physical environment together with others, it just helps seclude ourselves from distraction. It helps the experience become more powerful on our hearts. And that's why we're using the physical environment to focus only on our spiritual work. That's the power of coming to a physical retreat. However, if you can't and you still want to join, there's absolutely a great way to join virtually as well. We try to, as much as we can, have the same experience, create the same experience virtually. So it's a hybrid event. If you can come physically, that's absolutely, again, more preferable. And whether you come physically or virtually, there's a special discount now, 10% more than on top of the early bird price. So this is really the time to make a decision. It's a great time to make a decision. There is a coupon code that I'll tell you right now, and it'll also be in the chat and it's in the description, that is valid only for the next 48 hours. So it's a good time to make that decision. You can really, make yourself, set it in your schedule and know that this is kind of where you're going for. Again, this offer is limited for just 48 hours from now. And the coupon code for that, when you go to the retreat site and register and get your tickets, you just need to type in KES 10F. KES 10F, all in uppercase. KES for Kabbalah Explained Simply. 10F, I guess 10 free or something like that. Anyway, KES 10F. This is the website that you should find, retreat.kabuconnect.com. And you can use that coupon code. And of course, you can just learn about the retreat and take your time making the decision. You have a few hours to still use this coupon code. So check it out. Go to the retreat site if it interests you. This is a great opportunity for you to really experience what Kabbalah is about, whether you are a student already or not. These retreats are designed in such a way where if you have an initial interest and you've been through our materials, through the site and the materials there, will prepare you so that you have sufficient preparation to come and really get the most out of this event. All right, friends, I do have to conclude. I'm sorry that I didn't have more time for questions, but I am going now in a minute or two to the Zoom session with the KabU students, and you can register to KabU for free and join that session as well, where I'll be answering questions on this topic that we just discussed, or anything else. That's the purpose of this the coming Q&A session with the KabU students. So you're all invited to register and join that as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. I do hope that if you are on the fence or you're considering, make this gift for yourself. This is, I don't see any way that you will regret it. If anything, it's an experience that will be, at the very, very least, special and most likely life-changing. You can ask the people who were there, especially if it's your first time. All right, friends, thank you very much. My name is Asaf, and this was Kabbalah Explained Simply. All the best.